Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT-05, and BT-05 adds a lot of new and powerful tools to update some current and existing decks, and one of those decks is going to be the ever popular, the ever powerful WarGreymon in yellow. So WarGreymon in yellow was absolutely dominating in the BT-04 meta, and he's still looking to be a pretty good card to be using even in BT-05, thanks to all of the new control type tools that BT-05 is adding for the deck. So going over the deck, starting with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Upamon. So you could really do whatever kind of ratios on the Digitamas that you really feel like. I just feel like for what the meta is trying to prepare for, it wants us to play a little bit more controlling. So I don't necessarily value the card draw as much, considering we have a whole bunch of other ways of drawing cards. But I really like what Upamon is doing still, and I still think that having some card draw is very valuable, because Upamon's inheritable ability is really easy to trigger, where it's a when attacking ability once per turn. If you have 3 or fewer cards in your security, then you get to draw 1 card. So again, drawing is still really good. I just feel like we want to be a little bit more on the controlling side rather than on just trying to draw cards. And then the other Digitama of the deck that I'm going to be running is going to be 3 copies of Koromon. So again, you could feel free to play around with the ratios and do whatever you want with the Digitamas. I just really like what Koromon is doing, just because he has the same type of trigger where it's a when attacking ability. If we have 3 or fewer cards in our security, then we get to reduce one of the opponent's Digimon by 1000 DP. So this is just, again, adding to the overall control aspect on what the deck is trying to do, to just allow us to try to delete a wider variety of Digimon. So that way we could try to control the field as best as we possibly can. And then you could also consider running Piddomon, just because Piddomon is also doing a very similar style of ability. It's just, again, all depending on what you want to play and what you feel like you want to use. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 2 copies of BushiAgumon. So BushiAgumon is still just an absolutely insane card for this deck to be running, just because he has the rush ability. So the turn he comes into play is the turn that he could swing, and even though he does have a play cost of 5, we're almost never going to hard play him for 5. We're most likely going to be cheating him into play off of some various other cards. But regardless, the fact that we could help close out the game with BushiAgumon makes him just a very powerful card to be running. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Starmons. So Starmons is another really insane rookie for us to be playing, just because he has this nice on-play ability, where for each Digimon we have in play, then one of the opponent's Digimon gets minus 1000 DP for the turn. So the more Digimon we have in play, the stronger Starmons gets, and Starmons is acting as a really good removal type tool to just add to the overall control aspect that we're going to be leaning into with the deck. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Piddomon. So this is the promo Piddomon, and I feel like this Piddomon is really good. You could be Lucemon if you really felt like it, or you could do a split. It doesn't necessarily matter. We're just running Piddomon just because he has this nice ability where he allows us to recover 1. And the recovery ability is really, really valuable because we are WarGreymon and we are going to be dealing damage to ourselves. So making sure we could maintain a relatively healthy security is really important. It is only a little bit unfortunate that his on-play ability only lets us recover 1 as long as we have 1 or fewer cards in our security stack, so it's not going to be usable 100% of the time, but it does come in handy when it does come up. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Pulsemon. So Pulsemon is just still a really good rookie for us to be running, just because he has so much utility added to him that it's kind of hard not to want to run him, especially since in WarGreymon we can manipulate our security a little bit easier than some of the other decks. So what this card is doing is he has a nice on-play ability where if we have 3 or more cards in our security, then we get to draw 1 card. If we have 3 or less cards in our security, then we get to gain 1 memory. And if we're at exactly 3, then we get both of those abilities off. It's just his level of utility is just what's making him really good for the deck. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Piddomon. So this is the starter deck Piddomon, and this is kind of a flex spot if you really felt like you wanted to just split this card and do something else with it, or just put the ratios into other cards, then by all means feel free to do so. But I do think Piddomon is still really good for this deck just because we are trying to be a more control-focused deck, and his inheritable ability of during your turn, once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted by having its DP reduced to 0, then we get to gain 1 memory, and in yellow, we could use that 1 memory to enhance and extend some of our plays and make more powerful plays possible, which is why I like Piddomon. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Turuiemon. So Turuiemon, we're really only playing him in the deck just because he has a low evo cost of 1, making him just a very efficient Digimon to Digivolve into and off of, so that way we could tempo into our higher stages more efficiently, and that's the primary reason. He also has a secondary reason where he does have 6000 DP, which makes him a little bit harder to remove and act as a really decent body to start aggressing with, so he does have that going for him as well, making him just a really good card to be using. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Piddomon. So this is going to be the dedicated blocker of the deck. We're playing him primarily because he has the blocker ability, but on top of the fact that he also has the blocker ability, he evos for 1, which again, as I mentioned with Turuiemon, is just really tempo efficient to Digivolve into and off of if we feel like it. So he's just looking to be a really good card to be running for that. It is slightly unfortunate that he only has 5000 DP, making him a little bit more susceptible to a lot of forms of removal in the meta, but he's still just really good to have overall because, well, he's just a tempo efficient blocker. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Unimon. So this is just another flex spot. It doesn't necessarily have to be Unimon. It could be anything you feel like you want to run. So if you want to run something like the Gatomon from BT-03, where it just negs by 1000 per attack, that's still pretty good. If you want to run Upamon, then that's also pretty good. But I just feel like for what the deck is trying to do, Unimon is really fantastic just because he is acting as another blocker, and the 6000 DP difference versus the 5000 DP difference does matter quite a lot, making Unimon a harder blocker to deal with for the opponent. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Angewomon. So Angewomon is an absolutely insane card for this deck to be running, just because she has this nice when Digivolving ability where one of the opponent's Digimon gains security tech -2, so she could help stave off some of the opponent's aggression, and then on top of that, what we're really playing her for is her insane inheritable ability of when attacking, if we have 3 or fewer cards in our security, then we get to play 1 yellow level 3 Digimon from our hand for free. So this is the part of the ability that's really making the deck kind of function as a whole, just because we know with WarGreymon we could get multiple attacks off. We're also actively reducing our own security due to WarGreymon's ability, so it's going to be very easy to trigger Angewomon's ability, and the fact that we have so many powerful level 3 Digimon that we could be working with, and the fact that most of them have on-play abilities that will end up triggering, just make Angewomon absolutely insane to be playing for the deck, just because it turns, well, the majority of our deck online and makes it that much more powerful and threatening to deal with. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of WarGrowlmon. So this is the yellow version of WarGrowlmon, and this WarGrowlmon is also pretty decent for this deck just because he has this nice main ability of Digiburst 2. So by trashing 2 of his inheritable sources, you get to reduce one of the opponent's Digimon's DP by 4000 for the turn. So this is just starting with trying to reduce the opponent's DP, so that way we could hit higher numbers in case we're trying to delete bigger bodies, or we could use this to try to separate our DP reductions to hit multiple bodies in a single turn. So I really like just the utility that this ability has on how we could apply it, and on top of that, he also has a really nice inheritable ability where during your turn, while we have 3 or fewer cards in our security, then this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP, which just ensures that our Megas are going to have an easier time living through security. Next, on to the Megas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of WarGreymon. So WarGreymon is still looking to be a very good card for this meta, even though he has a lot less of a spotlight put on him thanks to some other yellow cards. He's still just very powerful as a whole, and what he's doing is still just very aggressive. So what he is doing is he has a nice when attacking ability where once per turn, we get to add the top card of our security stack to our hand, and then we get to unsuspend this Digimon and have one of the opponent's Digimon gain minus 6000 DP for the turn. So that's just a lot that goes into his ability. Essentially breaking it down, he allows you to draw a card from your security stack, thus reducing it to try to trigger our abilities. And then on top of that, he becomes active so he can multi-swing. And then on top of that, he's also reducing the opponent's Digimon by 6,000 DP, thus adding to the control elements of the deck, where we're just trying to DP reduce our opponent's Digimon to oblivion. So all of those three things attached to this one ability is just what makes WarGreymon really powerful and still just a very good card to be running because of all of the different ways we could use this ability. The multi-attacking just means he allows us to add more pressure, the DP reduction means he's allowing us to be more controlling, and the draw just helps with the overall consistency of the deck, on top of which it does synergize with Angewomon to try to turn her ability online, and we could multi-attack with Angewomon to try to play some of our rookies, and our rookies are looking to be pretty powerful, so we could play Bushi for more aggression, Starmons for more control, Pulsemon for more value, and Piddomon to try to heal. So it doesn't necessarily matter what we're playing, as long as we're just trying to spawn bodies on the board. We could create a very powerful board presence while figuring out decent ways to aggro and control all at the same time. And then the other level 6 in the deck and the supporting Mega I'm choosing to run is going to be 3 copies of Sakuyamon. Sakuyamon is kind of an underrated Digimon. She's really good for supporting control style decks and control style gameplay just because she's not super aggressive herself, and both of her abilities definitely benefit WarGreymon quite a lot. So her first ability is during the opponent's turn. When an opponent's Digimon moves from the raising area to the battle area, then it gets security tech -3. So this is just really important because we are going to be actively reducing our own security, so any way we could figure out how to stave off some damage is really good, and what makes Sakuyamon even more insane is the fact that she just turns off OTK decks for the most part. So there's just a lot of decks in the format that just want to go from raising to the battle area, and then just from the battle area be able to deal lots of damage with that one Digimon. So Sakuyamon, basically turning that entire gameplay strategy off, is just what makes Sakuyamon super powerful, on top of her other ability where during your turn, all of your opponent's security Digimon get -3,000 DP. So it's almost like when she's swinging into the security, she'll be swinging for 14, and then with WarGrowlmon helping her out, she'll be technically swinging for like 15 into the opponent's security, and that's just looking to be really powerful. But it's not only good for her, it's good for WarGreymon because this is all of your opponent's security Digimon get the debuff, so it makes WarGreymon going to be having an easier time living through security checks as well, on top of all of your other Digimon. Sakuyamon is just looking to be absolutely fantastic for what this deck is trying to do, but again, this is just the supporting Mega, and there's so many other supporting Megas that you could be running that it is kind of insane of all of the different tech options you could think of. And then the last Mega and only level 7 of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Chaosmon Valdur. So Chaosmon Valdur is still just a really powerful level 7 for us to be running because its Wind Digivolve ability is really good, adding to the overall control aspect of the deck, where we get to use the following ability twice, and that ability is one of the opponent's Digimon gets -7,000 DP for the turn. So you could stack it on one big body to try to delete one big body, or you could split it up between 2 smaller bodies to get rid of the 2 smaller bodies. It doesn't necessarily matter. He's just looking to be a very good card to help control the field as a whole, and he even has a good on delete ability of gaining 3 memory. So when the opponent is able to respond to Chaosmon, we're going to be taking away 3 of their memory, or if it's during our turn and we're aggressing and we hit something like an Omnimon in security, then we're going to be gaining 3 memory during our turn, and we could use that memory to do some very powerful things, or shut the opponent out from doing their powerful things. Next, onto the options, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Blinding Ray. So Blinding Ray is a really good card, but it's not a card I want to overly see, so that's kind of why I'm running it at 3. But Blinding Ray is still just absolutely insane for this deck, just because it has the nice main ability where we get to trash the top card of our security stack, then we get to gain 2 memory. So what's making Blinding Ray absolutely insane is the fact that we don't have to trash a card from our security stack to gain the 2 memory. So if we're just sitting at 0 security, then we could still Blinding Ray and gain the 2 memory. But otherwise, you do kind of have to do it where you're trashing a card from your security stack to gain the 2 memory. But it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world because we could use this relatively early on to gain some really good early tempo to try to make some super powerful plays and to set our security at a particular number. So if the opponent puts us at, let's just say, like 4 security, then we could use Blinding Ray to put us to 3 security to turn a lot of our cards and abilities online. or we could use this to preemptively put us to 4 security, so that way when we digivolve into WarGreymon and we're able to swing with him, then that'll put us to 3 security, and then that'll turn all of our abilities online. So it doesn't necessarily matter how we use the card, it's just looking to be a very good card to be using overall, just because that gaining the 2 memory could make or break a lot of plays and a lot of turns. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Spiral Masquerade. So Spiral Masquerade is another really powerful option card we could think about using, and I think it's really good for this style of deck just because it is pretty decent and easy to flood the field with how our deck is going to be playing. So Spiral Masquerade is looking to capitalize and utilize our very wide board to just further enhance the control elements of the deck, because it has this nice ability where for each Digimon we have in play, we get to activate the following ability of reducing one of the opponent's Digimon's DP by 3,000. So the bigger board we have, the harder this card will hit, and we could get a really big board relatively easy thanks to the multi-swings off of WarGreymon paired up with Angewomon on top of anything else we could have had on the field beforehand. So Spiral Masquerade is just acting as another really good control card to try to handle threats that we might not be able to deal with otherwise. And then on top of that, it has the nice security ability of activating its main, so if we just have a couple of Digimon on the field and they check Spiral Masquerade because they might not be anticipating it, then Spiral Masquerade could absolutely wreck their field and they don't even know that it's coming. And then the last card of the deck is going to be the only tamer of the deck, and that's going to be 3 copies of TK. So this is the BT-01 version of TK, and this TK is still just really important for the deck because he is going to be the deck's dedicated memory fixing tamer. So if our memory is ever less than 3, he'll just always hard set it to 3, and we need it to be at 3, so that way we could play our higher levels that much more efficiently, just because all of them do Evo for 3. So that's just really, really important that we can make sure that we could always play our high levels efficiently. And then on top of that, he also has some really good consistency for the deck with his on-play ability, where we get to look at our security stack, add 1 card from among them into our hand. If that card is yellow, then we get to recover 1, which is really good just because, again, we're utilizing our security stack to try to get more cards, and we're trying to use the security stack to fix our hand. So this is just looking to be a really good card to be playing overall. And then, as I stated before, there's just a whole bunch of other things that you could do with the deck depending on what you want to play and what you want to get out of. It doesn't necessarily matter just because yellow as a whole has some really high levels of synergy and everything just meshes and melds together very nicely to make it really powerful no matter what you're using. So, like I said before, if you wanted to use a different Digitama and double down on even more control, then Piddomon is really good because his when attacking inheritable is not locked to once per turn, but it is going to be a tiny bit harder to get the minus 1000 DP off just because the condition isn't as easy as some of our other Digitamas that we're currently running. And then on top of that, if you want more recovery, then you could play into some more recovery just because we are damaging ourselves quite a bit. So we have access to BT-02 Salamon to try to help us recover through its on-deletion ability. And then we also have Lucemon as another really good rookie that we could play to try to recover just because its on-play literally is recover 1. And it's not out of the question to get 10 cards in our trash. So that way this card can be played for 5 instead of 13. Most of the time you cheat out for free anyway, but it's still just a really good card to think about if we want to play recovery. And then if you want to double down on some more of the control style aspects of what the deck is going to do, then you could also consider running the BT-03 Salamon just because it has the nice when attacking ability not limited once per turn to have your opponent's Digimon get minus 1000 DP. And in the champion slot, we also have Gatomon that we could be playing that's doing the exact same thing. So there's just more added control elements to the deck, and you could also consider running other tempo efficient champions if you so feel like it. Then on top of that, we also have just a slew of other very good level 5s that we can run. So if you want to run WarGreymon, then he's really good for his inheritable ability to just continuously DP reduce the opponent's Digimon, and his Digiburst ability allows us to play our red and yellow tamers more efficiently than we normally would. So that's just looking to be pretty good there. And then on top of that, we also, again, still have more recovery we could be playing around with. So we have the starter deck Angewomon, which is just generically recovering us 1 for having 3 or fewer cards in our security. So she's just, again, another really good recovery option. And on top of that, we also still have some really good tempo efficient ultimates that you could consider playing as well, like Sirenmon. Then, if you want to spice up your megas, we also have a whole bunch of other really powerful megas you could consider running. So if you want, you could run Seraphimon if you're going to be trying to play a little bit more into recovery, just because he does have the Recover 1 when you Digivolve into him, and he could gain Security Tech +1 for you just having 3 or more cards in your security. So if you're at exactly 3, then he'll still get the Security Tech +1, and that could be pretty powerful, especially if we pair that up with Sakuyamon to debuff the opponent's security. Then we also have Digimon to consider thinking about, where if we want to lean a little bit more into turboing up into Chaosmon, then Digimon is really good because he just has a nice on-deletion ability of Recovery 1. So again, there's just that sub-theme of recovery where we are going to be dealing lots of damage. So figuring out different ways that we could heal ourselves is really good. On top of which, Digimon evos for 2, so we could just get into Chaosmon Valdur Arm very easily just because of that. And he has 10,000 DP, so if we need him to die, him just being able to die to the opponent's high-level Digimon in their security isn't necessarily out of the question. Plus, if they're going to have to try to eventually deal with Digimon, then we're still going to be recovering for them dealing with him. Then on top of that, we also have Magnadramon, just because Magnadramon is really good, whether we hard play it and recover 2, or we just use it to Digivolve up into and get its when attacking ability off to just free play more bodies. It's still just a really good card to be using. And then we do have a couple of other support packages that you could consider running with the deck if you're going to be swapping out your supporting megas. So we could run a sub-Masty build and utilize the Gatomon to act as another blocker and heal us. On top of which, Mastimon also just allows us to spawn a body from our trash and can be very efficient in her own ways. And then on top of that, we do have Lord Nightmon, where if the idea is just trying to play bodies, then just the ability to just play our level 3 Digimon is really powerful. If you are running warriors, then the only one that's really noteworthy is going to be Nightmon, just because Nightmon also DP reduces and is a level 5 that we could play for free off of Lord Nightmon. So that's just some really good synergy there, and Lord Nightmon will also be making herself stronger for all of the Digimon that you have on the field, doubling down on that as well. And then let's not forget about some other just really insane cards that you could think about running, like slashangemon. You could also run Lotmon. Like, the list just goes on and on that I could spend all day talking about how good yellow is as a whole and all of the different supporting tools you could think about playing. But at the end of the day, yellow as a whole is still just very powerful just because how all of its parts and pieces are moving and interacting with each other to just create some very high levels of synergy. And WarGreymon is just a really good card to capitalize on a whole bunch of that synergy, just because the card is doing a lot and interacting with a lot, allowing you to just be able to play a whole bunch of variety of different cards, tech, and tools, again, all depending on what you feel like you actually are going to be using. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.